We're going to slightly change the agenda a little bit. Just before we get into the full agenda of what did we find and what was the important messages. One of the things that I do, and it's been a legacy since Michelle Scott, and I really commend Michelle for starting it, is that I have a thing called ambassadors for children and young people. They're eminent West Australians, and they have a role to play in helping me and my office to make sure that the message about the needs of children and young people are actually made very, very public. And they're very eminent West Australians, as I said, and they have a role to play in very high profile positions. One thing that we didn't have, unfortunately, amongst the ambassadors was someone who could speak authoritatively, not only internally but externally, on issues to do with culturally and linguistically diverse backgrounds. So I've invited, and I've been absolutely delighted to have this person accept to become an ambassador, is Casta Tungaraza. And Casta is, as I've said to you earlier, has done a lot of work with, particularly around supporting African women and children. And I'm really delighted that she's now going to join the ambassadors. And because she has to now rush off because of a very important meeting in the eastern states, when I don't want her to miss the plane. So we're going to actually hear from Casta first, and then we'll get into the actual responses that we've heard from children and young people. Can you please, from my point of view, thank and certainly welcome Casta as one of the new ambassadors for children and young people. Thanks, Casta.
Thank you, Colin. Good morning, and I'm so sorry for the slight change in the program. We have the, I think you'll be aware that for the first time, Australia has formed the advisory group on Africa-Australia relations. And we worked through DFAT, and that was launched by Honourable Julie Bishop in early this year, late last year. I can't remember the exact dates. And so we have a meeting today in the eastern states, so I'm very sorry about that. Well, thank you for the introduction. And for inviting me this morning to share a few words about my work with the youth from CALD groups, and in particular, most of my work is with the African youth. And I'm very pleased to be appointed as one of the ambassadors for children and young people. I work with young people in many ways, and this morning, I will share just a few thoughts that I have about issues for young people. Of course, young people themselves can present their issues better than any non-young person can do. However, we do, I think we have a role to play. But what is in this, in the definition of CALD youth? Because definitions really fascinate me. They form identity or represent someone's identity. Who and how these definitions developed, and why do they change over time? I'm not able to answer that question, but who are these CALD youth? Sometimes we hear about migrant youth, refugee youth, humanitarian entrant youth, newly arrived young person, unaccompanied minors, second generation youth, CALD youth, and sometimes multicultural youth. So which one are you? CALD, or multicultural youth, usually is a term that incorporates people from the culturally and linguistically diverse backgrounds, and I work more often with the youth from new and emerging communities. So And new and emerging communities is a term that is used to define young communities, that youth belonging to communities that are fairly small in number, newly arrived, and have all or a combination of the following characteristics: significant increase in number over the last 5 years, often lack established family networks, support systems, community structures, and resources relative to more established communities, can be more vulnerable than established communities, as they are often from a refugee background and have experienced displacements due to civil unrest. They comprise individuals with low level of education and skill due to displacement, comprise individuals who do not have English language skills, comprise individuals who are unfamiliar with mainstream government services and are available in Australia and are less likely to be able to locate services that can help them meet their basic needs. They tend not to have community infrastructures and organizations that can attract funding. This is actually the definition that we use with FECA, the Federation of Ethnic Communities Council Advisory Committee on Policy for New and Emerging Communities. I've been on that committee. I've just recently resigned from that committee. So for quite some time, we tried to redefine young people from CALD backgrounds and new and emerging communities. While in many respects, CALD young people share the same or similar challenges as the general population of young people, my work with FECA's New and Emerging Communities Policy Advisory Council revealed that a range of specific issues may place CALD young people at increased risk of personal, social, economic disadvantage. These issues generally cluster around the following areas: home, intergenerational conflict between parents and children, and the impact of financial burdens and experience of torture and trauma on family relationships; community, in the community, discrimination and prejudice within the community, including intergroup tensions and racism; sport and recreation, a shortage of facilities appropriate for young people; transport and financial difficulties, lack of knowledge about sporting organizations and clubs, and a lack of engagement with CALD communities by sporting organizations, clubs, and leisure centers. It is getting better. Health, lack of awareness of the willingness to access services related to mental, sexual, and substance abuse issues; compulsory education, challenges in the education setting, including meeting personal and parental expectations; post-compulsory education; employment, because I know most of you work in this area, so I'll just go through them without much explanation. There is a strong need for additional specialized support for CALD young people and their families in the areas of health and community services, education and career advice, academic learning support, and the transition from education to employment. Numerous strategies and projects to address some of these issues are happening all over Australia. Many will come from the consultation with the young people that has just recently been completed. Significant gaps in service delivery remain. However, and without a coordinated strategy, the impact of current and future initiatives is likely to be limited. There are many service providers who develop programs with a range of tools and strategies to support the economic, social, and cultural participation of CALD youth in Australia. A good example is a community-based program that is called I Empower, that is offered in Victoria with, by quite a number of colleagues that work with FECA, and we've worked together in many other projects. Their support work takes place takes place in a number of settings, including schools, sports and recreation centers, vocational education training centers, and in the community. A combination of outreach, one-on-one specialist case management, and group work to support and empower young people who are at risk to overcome issues, connect to the community, and settle well in Australia. They offer tools, linkages, and pathways that support young people to overcome a range of barriers, including understanding the migration system, registering with essential services, accessing health and mental health services, comprehending Australian social systems, accessing education, training and employment pathways, linking into sport and recreation opportunities, dealing with family issues, accessing accommodation and housing support, navigating financial or legal difficulties, and accessing material aid. We all know that adolescence is a period of transition to adulthood. For some, this symbolizes independence. In the Western world, age in terms of number of years of an individual is important for service providers to categorize their clients. However, this may not be the case for many youth from CALD backgrounds due to cultural norms. Young people from CALD backgrounds live in both cultures. Service providers need cultural awareness to understand multiple perspectives and views of their clients, quote unquote, as well as they need to have high level of cultural competence to provide appropriate services to meet the needs of youth from many culturally diverse backgrounds. Many providers have no sufficient knowledge and experience to address the diversity of needs of youth from CALD backgrounds. If we are in this business, then it is our business to keep learning and catching up with the diverse needs of our communities. Access and equity. I'll just say something briefly about this. Through my long-term work with CALD youth, I realized that many are not accessing accessing mainstream support services. Our observation revealed that access is an issue. There are many opportunities, however, without appropriate access, these are not reaching the intended beneficiaries. Good intentions do not always result to good outcomes. Lack of awareness of services. How to get to where these services are depends on location and availability of transport to that location. Navigation of procedures to access these services. Understanding systems and processes. Financial barriers, trust, need for confidentiality, and respect for those providing services. Language and cultural barriers, literacy levels, etc., depending on the issue. When it comes to physical abuse, this has actually been providing services to CALD youth has been even more challenging. And expectations of the CALD youth when they are accessing these services. How far does one go to help? A good example, some of the young people who have approached the African Women's Council, when they need legal assistance, for example, or legal advice, most organizations that do voluntary work, they point them, they just provide them with information of where to go, what is available. However, or they would advise them to go to legal aid. However, it is not as easy to navigate that system. So provision of information alone is not enough. And I've been asked even recently that, I cannot hold their hand. However, they know that legal service is available. However, or legal aid, how do they expect someone to actually provide a bit more? So if you take that one extra mile, it can help if you have the time. That would be more helpful. Flexibility and commitment is required of organizations to engage in continuous improvement, monitoring, implementation of their strategies, and evaluation processes that involve youth. Lack of adequate human resources and financial resources for service providers is a problem to provide consistent and sustainable services. Many service providers here will agree with my observation that the greatest challenge is the decision to stop programs that are working well because of the end of funding period. They have to deal with disappointed youth, regain their trust, watching helplessly a group of marginalized youth going through yet another disappointing experience when programs are discontinued. The good news is youth participation in issues impacting them is on an increase now. Efforts are being done. Representation of CALD youth issues on various advisory boards and committees is important. The message is getting out there. You cannot solve issues affecting young people in isolation of young people. It is crucial that we validate experiences of youth and their knowledge. Furthermore, there are benefits for organizations in doing this. CALD youth at the decision-making table enhance intercultural understanding and social and cultural inclusion. The benefits of empowering young people to participate in the planning, development, and implementation of youth programs and services are many. The rights of young people under 18 to participate in decisions affecting their own destiny have historically been controversial, with the central issue being whether the best interests of the child are better served. I believe that with informed leadership, organizations will be able to make good assessment, and together they can come up with best practice and lasting solutions. So it's important to welcome those young people and to provide those services. I commend the Commissioner for Children and Young People and his team for taking the lead on broad consultation of young people from various backgrounds, and I encourage you to provide the required support and collaborate to ensure that the voices and actions of young people are present in order to remove barriers and provide appropriate services of the 21st century. Thank you.